and welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Jessica Clemons and I just saw Beetlejuice Beetlejuice, and what a bundle of fun. It's very camp, very silly, and very just exciting and energetic all around. It's kind of like weirdly paced with many plot points, but every character gets an arc, and I kind of like that, and I kind of needed it. The whimsy was there, and it was all I ever wanted in like a Beetlejuice movie. It rekindles and brings back everything from the '88 film that I just really love. In this video, I'll be breaking it down and revealing some of the little throwback Easter eggs you probably missed throughout watching it yourself. And this is also just a blanket warning, a spoiler warning, because I'm gonna spoil the entire movie, the 1998 movie as well. Before we get into it though, I just wanna remind you to go to nerdride.shop to go look at our awesome merch options. We got some Agatha All Along shirts and tank tops, the Blade Daywalker shirt, my favorite Where's Wade t-shirt. Supporting nerdride.shop is the best way to support the channel. Okay, that's enough. Let's get into the breakdown. We open the movie to this chromed out Warner Brothers logo, the black and white skies, kind of matching Beetlejuice's jacket. The music playing is Donna Summer's MacArthur Park, which will be the big musical number for this movie, and I love MacArthur Park. Who doesn't? That's the greatest song. As with the 1988 original, the new film score has been composed by longtime Burton collaborator Danny Elfman as well. The movie opens the same with an overview of the model of Winter River, though we see little toy cars lit up and moving through as well. We see Barbara and Adam in the ditch outside the old house like they're always watching over them. The intro credits then end, taking us directly to the old Maitland's home, which is also how the first movie began, but instead of a giant spider, we see the attic lit up by Lydia. Lydia Dietz is played by the once and forever Winona Ryder. We actually saw this introduction with Lydia warning us in the trailer, and it's teed up in this movie like Elvira's welcoming us back to her show. Lydia also has the same haircut. A lot has stayed the same with this movie, especially that hairstyle. This also reminds me that Tim Burton is really particular about these sort of things. On Wednesday, they went 2 hours over on one day because of Jenna Ortega's hair, because Wednesday's hair had to be pristine and perfect. Lydia is now like a medium psychic after the events of the 1988 movie and hosts a TV show called Ghost House. This is similar to that British show Ghost Watch, and the set is actually a replicate of her attic at the Maitland home. During her show, in the audience, we see a man in a striped collar shirt that immediately reminds me of Pugsley from Addams Family, and he flashes to Beetlejuice. I just wanted to call it out because, I mean, he does kind of look like Pugsley. That's when we meet her boyfriend and producer Rory, played by Justin Theroux, who does an exceptional job in this movie. This man is just so funny and so fun. It almost made me forget he kind of started his career on stage doing comedy. And also his best friend is like Amy Sedaris, so of course his comedic weirdness is on point in this movie. This is also when we learn that Delia, Lydia's stepmom, has moved on from sculptures and into a more diverse portfolio to broaden her taste. Catherine O'Hara reprises her role as Delia Dietz. She is exactly to a T what Moira Rose from Schitt's Creek is, and it works perfectly for this film. How did I not expect this going this way? There's also a piece of her art show where we see the silhouette of birds over her white robed body, and tell me this isn't the scene from The Crows Have Eyes, The Croning, with Moira Rose as Dr. Clara from Schitt's Creek. This has to be a call out. There is no other way. Regardless, the two have returned to New York and live their days doing performance art and hosting a great ghost show, I guess. That's when we find out that Charles Dietz actually died. He was flying to watch birds mate and his plane crashed into the water and he was eaten by a shark. Well, more so bit in half. This scene actually was all played out in stop motion, which we know Tim Burton loves. Stop motion animation brings a lot of the classic Beetlejuice elements regardless, and I like that they brought it back for this scene. A stand-in portrays the half-eaten Charles ghost throughout the movie, but the actor doesn't return. And I assume this is because he kind of disappeared following his 2002 arrest, which a quick Google search will tell you all about. What's interesting about his death though is that the writers included it as one of Tim Burton's biggest fears in the movie. And if you think that's ridiculous to have that fear, please look up what most likely happens to people when they jump off cruise ships. Horrifying. Then we're introduced to Danny DeVito's character, the janitor, who listens to Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville. He resembles the dead janitor from the original movie played by Simi Bo, who passed away in 1987 before the film's release. Like Bo's character, the janitor cleans in the afterlife and points a newly dead person on their way. That's when his machine then makes contact with a puddle of liquid, electrocuting him and everything around him that reanimates the separated corpse of Dolores, played by Monica Bellucci. During this scene, she pieces her sexy self back together while Tragedy by the Bee Gees plays. She grabs her legs and ears, but I like it when she calls over her finger because it reminds us why it's perhaps separated from the rest of her fingers, because Beetlejuice had it.
There you go. I'm telling you, honey, she meant nothing to me. Nothing at all.
This scene is so smooth and I'm genuinely like so obsessed with it. Also, yes, she's dating Tim Burton and this character feels a little non-essential in the film, but I freaking love Monica Bellucci in this. I'm smitten by Dolores, maybe that's it. Dolores is Beetlejuice's first wife and was revealed in a release clip not long before the premiere. Before he was a demon, it's revealed Beetlejuice met Dolores during the Black Plague, and this isn't news. He told us he lived through the Black Plague in the first movie actually.
I attended Juilliard. I'm a graduate of the Harvard Business School. I travel quite extensively. I lived through the Black Plague, and I had a pretty good time during that.
In an homage to Mario Bava's Black Sunday, he shows us and tells us the story of their love in Italian, which, again, come on, this is just a great setup. You remember that line from the first movie?
Hope you like Italian.
He tells us they fell in love and got married, but she was a part of a cult that in exchange for her immortality needed Beetlejuice's life and soul. However, in his dying, he was like, forget that, and killed her with an axe. So they both died, but she never got his soul, which is why she's returned searching and killing everyone in her way to find him. Then we meet Astrid, played by Jenna Ortega. She's at a boarding school and doesn't like her mom. She's like Lydia at her age. And her father, who we meet later, died. He was an activist out on a cause to save the rainforest in Brazil, and he died in a boating accident where they never recovered his body. In her dad's steed, she is now also an activist and a believer in science. This is also why she doesn't really like her medium psychic mother who can see ghosts. Outside the art center for Astrid's school, which her family donated, you can see the statue that trapped Delia in the first movie. It's massive. We also see a smaller one later in front of the Dietz house. Back at the old house, we're looking at the miniature White River model, and you can actually see a little Barbara and Adam Maitland where the car crashed through the Red Bridge. Later, Astrid also calls back to the Maitlands, calling them the ghost in the attic. Lydia tells her that they actually moved on, having found a loophole. Both Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin are not returning in this movie, and Tim Burton said he didn't want their appearance to be just another tick in a box. Though the writers said that they were in a version of the script showing up at the end, but since they're ghosts, they needed to look like they were 35, which was never going to happen, and in conclusion, their stories were kind of told, so stop asking them. Then we see Beetlejuice's iconic sign by the great model tree, also from the original movie Beam. This all happens once they call his name a single time. That's when we're taken to Beetlejuice's whereabouts, running a bioexorcism call center. In the original film, it was an illegitimate and independent scam business. It could still be a scam, but he's marketed it very well, even outsourcing the shrunken heads as workers. Then we see one of the best parts of this film, which is seeing the recently deceased. There are so many dead people, and you get to play this game of how did they die like in the first movie. We see a cat lady dead and eaten by her cats. The woman playing her is actually Caroline Laurie, who played Martha in Wednesday. This man that was choked by hot dogs, I assume during a hot dog eating contest. We have an astronaut that's head blew up due to loss of oxygen, an activist, of course, a surfer dude, which I'd like to add in the first movie when they enter the waiting room, there's a man whose leg was wholly consumed by a shark. So this isn't the first shark murder in the afterlife waiting room. And then the woman who works behind the counter is no longer Miss Argentina. It's a hot dog on a stick girl. I also think Warner Brothers had like a little pop-up that featured some of these icons in it. Later in the afterlife waiting room, we see the Houdini-esque man, a very dead Santa Claus, and unfortunately, like the charred man from the original movie, this man probably died being burned alive. And I assume delivering presents like Santa, but to a chimney on fire. Just like the Gremlins dad. Thank you, BetterHelp, for sponsoring this video. Autumn's here, and if you're feeling stressed by the thought of going back to school or overwhelmed by all the work you have to do before the end of the year, it might be time to talk to a therapist. That's something BetterHelp can help you do. BetterHelp makes starting therapy easier and less intimidating for a lot of people. First, use our link to go to their site, betterhelp.com/newrockstars. The site will ask you to answer a few questions so BetterHelp can match you up to one of their over 30,000 therapists who they think can help you out the most. The therapist they pick for you will have tons of experience dealing with whatever you're going through. Every single one of their therapists is licensed, has a master or doctorate degree, and has spent over 3 years and 1,000 hours working with people just like you. You'll be matched to a therapist usually within 48 hours, so you can get started fast. We've been promoting BetterHelp for a while and have heard some amazing feedback from you guys, and we got permission to share this review from one of our viewers who said this. I've had a few therapists over the last couple of years. My therapist was the most open and accommodating therapist I've ever had. He listened when I needed to talk and told me some hard truths when I needed to listen. I couldn't recommend him more. Let BetterHelp connect you to a therapist who can support you all from the comfort of your own home. Visit betterhelp.com/newrockstars or choose New Rockstars during sign up and enjoy a special discount on your first month. This is where we meet the Afterlife Crime Unit, the ACU. It's run by Willem Dafoe's character. Willem Dafoe's character is named Wolf Jackson, and as you can see, half his head is missing. Wolf Jackson was an actor who liked to perform his own stunts, and he died from a live grenade on set. His assistant, Janet, died from a gunshot. His whole thing and catchphrase is, gotta keep it real. So I don't know if it's sound advice or even a good catchphrase, but you can tell Willem Dafoe's having a good time. I'm sure he probably improvised this because look at how he says it. Back at Winter River, they're holding the funeral for Charles Dietz, the iconic banana boat deo that left us with such a great impression in the original movie. During the dinner scene is now sung by the Sylvia Young Theater School Choir. When talking to Father Damien, played by Bern Gorman, he tells Delia not to fret. He says that the birds will lead Charles into the afterlife to the Elysian Fields. Little does he know that they already know what awaits them in the afterlife. Though he's also not wrong. We see later the soul train takes you to the Elysian Field. fields. After the funeral, back at the house that's whimsically also in mourning, we meet little Jane Butterfield. In the original movie, she was also called Little Jane. Her mother, Jane Butterfield, was the real estate agent who was always trying to take the house from the Maitlands. Now that it's back on the market, her daughter is taking it on, and I just like this little sweet callback. It's so nice. Delia also mentions around here Maxie Dean being invited, who was the guy that was shot through the ceiling in the first movie. After a funny, awkward, clumsy proposal, Lydia agrees to marry Rory in front of everybody during her dad's funeral, which makes Astrid sick. So she takes the bike from the house, which resembles Lydia's from the first movie's ending, and goes for a little joyride. On her ride, we see the red bridge that the Maitlands drove off of, which now has a speed limit. We also see Miss Shannon's house for girls, which Lydia attended. Then in a series of very clumsy events, Astrid drives right through a fence, smacking into a tree. This tree looks just like the one from Sleepy Hollow, which fans believe could also be the same tree in Corpse Bride. I think this is all true because look at that tree. It looks the same. I'm very passionate about this tree because I love Sleepy Hollow and I love Corpse Bride. In the tree house is Jeremy, played by Arthur Conti. And if you saw Wednesday, my girl stays falling in love with murderers. It's revealed later that Jeremy is a ghost who is actually just a crazy person who killed his mom and dad 23 years ago, then in a standoff with the police, fell out of his treehouse, breaking his neck and dying instantly. We should have known he was a ghost when he said he got the recently deceased book from a garage sale. That book was directly sent to him. Like, why didn't I see this coming? Also, his bedroom is entirely 90s. He had a poster for the Pixies. They mentioned that he also only listens to vinyls, and I thought it was just him being like emo, not that he's from the 90s directly. Jane refers to their house on Jefferson Street as the murder house, but doesn't his story and all of this feel like American Horror Story Murder House as well? Like he is Evan Peters' character. Regardless, he kindles a friendship with Astrid over Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. This is just a novel about a student who commits random murders without much remorse. When you analyze it, it's more than that, but I gave you a light synopsis, so you're welcome. Beetlejuice later quotes Dostoevsky again before sending Jeremy to hell. Back with the Dietz family as a whole, Delia tells Astrid and Lydia that the life with Charles wasn't all good, but it also wasn't all bad either. When asked what was so bad, she says, he bought this house without telling me, which is just so funny because just go back and watch that movie if you haven't recently. It'll tell you just how much she initially hated that house. She did not want to move there in the first place. She hated it so much. Astrid goes up to the attic, which looks the same as the first movie, and just how iconic is that? The only addition I think is a map of White River, the same blueprint used in Charles Dietz' office in the first movie. She pulled back the sheet and found a flyer for the bio-exorcist, telling them to call Beetlejuice. He can even find you a love connection. This kind of resembles the original bio-exorcist flyer from the original movie as well. She also finds a box of her old dad's stuff, including a photo album with memories of him and Lydia tells Astrid he took her to go see Mario Bava's Kill Baby Kill, the Italian Gothic horror film. This is also the second thing that Mario Bava has influenced in this film. Lydia's cleaning her dad's office afterwards, and again, it is still covered in birds like it was in the '88 film. Her phone starts going off with a billion notifications, all ads for Beetlejuice with different still frames from the '88 film. We hear the sound clip from the ad pop-ups, that sound clip of, ooh, I got demons running all through me from the original movie. I'm sorry. I love that sound clip. I need that as my ringtone. Also, this is like the modern version of how they get ads for Beetlejuice as opposed to the old TV infomercial type one that they got in the old movie. Lydia realizes she has to tell Rory about Beetlejuice since he's clearly sneaking back into the picture. Rory says his name 3 times intentionally and they're immediately shot through a tunnel. And this tunnel has snippets from the 1988 Beetlejuice movie lining the wall. Once they land in the miniature White River town, across from Shannon's school for girls is the Beetlejuice therapy office. Lydia says Beetlejuice's name and he squeals. This is also done in the original film when Barbara tried to shoo him away. He slapped a titanium bar across her mouth, but here he uses the same like sewing technique on the shrunken head men. As soon as they get into the office, we get this running slapstick jokes that make me love Beetlejuice so much. We get the joke of literally spilling his guts, his literal inner child, which you can now buy as a life-size baby Beetlejuice prop replica. The little him starts biting Lydia's leg and he says something like, oh, he's a leg man just like me, which we know from the first movie. He also makes all the different wings and feet stick out of his head like the first film, and it's just such a classic move.
You're a figment of my imagination.
Really? Is this a figment of your imagination?
Oh.
What do you think of this?
Lydia then has enough and says home 3 times, which as we know brings you back to your home. That's when she looks back and sees Beetlejuice lip syncing Right Here Waiting by Richard Marx. This soundtrack is A+, top tier. We went from Deo to Richard Marx's Right Here Waiting for You. Lydia later calms down after that Beetlejuice encounter and takes Astrid to see Jeremy, who she says is dressed up like James Dean. Jeremy is dressed as James Dean from Rebel Without a Cause, which feels on brand for Jeremy, but also famously James Dean, you know, is also dead. His parents say it's Richie from Happy Days. I'm saying Thriller's Michael Jackson. Astrid is dressed like Marie Curie, who yes, worked heavily in radiation, discovering the element radium, and then later died from the immense exposure due to her work. She said she got this dark idea for costumes from her dad, who helped her dress up in an outfit inspired by Edvard Munch's Scream. You know, the iconic painting that inspired the mask from the Scream movies that star Jenna Ortega. Small world. Who would have thought? Not me. Everyone says this scene is where Tim Burton's team takes a dig and throws shade at Disney. Jane mentions her daughter dressing up as a Disney princess, and Lydia tells her how Astrid would never do that, but had dressed up as Cinderella's dead mother. This is a dig at Disney because Tim Burton hated his time doing Dumbo. I feel like if he wanted to throw shade at Disney, he would have actually thrown it. This is just a fact. I never liked dressing up as a Disney princess either. I like dressing up as like the Scrooge. This is when Astrid is about to be tricked into going into the underworld with Jeremy. From the book, they learn the infamous chalk outline door and knock 3 times. But this time to go, Astrid has to read an incantation. Later we learn it cements the ritual. When they enter the afterlife, they have to move through a turnstile just like Barbara and Adam did. With no one to go to, Lydia calls upon Beetlejuice, and the model town starts to light up and shake, and we see cracks being made in the miniature town, which is how Beetlejuice reveals himself to everyone at the end of the first movie before tricking Lydia into marriage. He says, "The juice is loose," which is a play off of the name of O.J. Simpson, you know, phrase that was coined after the murder or death of Nicole Brown. Y'all remember it. He promises to help Lydia if she officially marries him this time. All of this to get Dolores off his back. He's lying. It's not just for Dolores. Once she signs the contract, he then takes her into the afterlife for Astrid. To take her into the afterlife though, they have to sneak through the back door. So he creates a bomb instead of a door. This chalk bomb is actually featured in Multiverses if you play as Beetlejuice, and I knew playing that game would come in handy this day. I like that in the first movie, Juno, the caseworker, had to work with a bunch of dead football players whose coach survived the accident. Now Wolf Jackson works with a dead coach who I'm assuming was accidentally killed by her athlete with a javelin through her neck. With that, the alarm blares and the loudspeaker says violation code 699. This code will come up later in the movie, so stand by for its importance. Delia has now made it to the afterlife and is pulling a real Karen move here, not knowing where to go but also denying that she's actually dead. This is when she calls upon Beetlejuice, who agrees to help her in exchange for Lydia. We then see the immigration line and TSA part of the afterlife, which is actually really freaking cool, and we didn't actually see this at all in the first movie. There's no reason why we would have, but I really love them blowing out this world and us getting to see it. It's so much fun, and I know it's all practical. As Astrid just learned, Jeremy is duping her. He needs her life in exchange for his to walk the mortal world again. In the original movie, Beetlejuice had to marry Lydia to stay above, though I assume the woman must be alive in order to do that. In this movie, it looks like Jeremy's doing the same thing, just without the marriage and, you know, not caring where Astrid goes. Astrid's about to be taken to the Soul Train. Now, I don't understand how they didn't make this joke before. I also don't understand how I didn't catch this joke the first time in my trailer breakdown. This train takes you to particular parts of the afterlife with a gang of funky people. You can hear Soul Train's theme, the scat version song, play as they dance. Behind them is the entrance and the same bent out of shape doorway saw in the afterlife's hallway they traveled through in the original movie. The train arrivals will take you to great places like the Great Beyond, which is on time. Though the Pearly Gates, Fires of Damnation, and of course, Elysian Fields are all delayed. Elysian Fields is also Greek mythology, the final resting place, and I think we can all deduce the Great Beyond, Pearly Gates, and Fires of Damnation. Lydia saves Astrid from the Great Beyond Express, and they make a run for the emergency exit, which leads them to the Sandworm planet. Astrid mentions it's near Saturn, so they must be on one of Saturn's moons. This felt like a crazy out-of-place thing to say when you're watching the movie, but Saturn was allegedly what Beetlejuice would call that planet. In the original script, they were going to call it Titan, one of Saturn's moons. There's reason to believe it could still be Titan in the first film, but here we know it's definitely one of Saturn's moons, maybe allegedly could be Titan. After being saved by Richard and getting a very kind rekindling moment, they arrive in the front of the church in time for the wedding. Once she arrives, Beetlejuice is there with Delia waiting to get hitched. After making Rory confess he's a gold digger, Lydia knocks him out with Beetlejuice's glove. This immediately, again, takes me back to Multiverses, the video game. You can actually use his boxing glove and with other opponents, and I knew playing that game, again, would come in handy. Beetlejuice then sucks all the influencers into their phone. It's a stretch, but the animation of them being sucked into their phone resembles the transformation from Adam in the original movie. But as I mentioned, with a modern version of the ads on Lydia's phone instead of the old school infomercial from the original film, from the phone's POV, it looks like one of those filters where you can turn yourself into a horse. I'm sure this is just poking fun at kids being sucked into their phones. Beetlejuice turns in his iconic suit and Lydia's iconic red dress from the first movie. I love this red burgundy suit, it's so nice. During the wedding, someone says Beetlejuice and he interrupts saying it's in the contract to not say his name during the wedding. And having learned from the first movie when everyone kept trying to send him back during the wedding, this makes sense. And like like the first movie where they were forced to lip sync and dance to Deo, here they're doing it to MacArthur Park sung by Richard Harris. This scene, I'm obsessed with. It's so fun, it's so good. We get to see Wednesday dance again. The entire wedding sequence with the choreographed dance, Wolf Jackson even interrupting, and the band is just so fun and great. I could watch this scene over and over and over again. I just love it. Astrid finds the handbook for the recently deceased and learns to call the sandworm. Like in the first movie, we're trying to believe that maybe the sandworm will swallow Beetlejuice again, but this time Beetlejuice, as a matador, serves Rory and Dolores to the sandworm. The last time this happened, Beetlejuice was just sent to the waiting room, so I'm sure Dolores and Rory are fine. They're just probably bored. But fine. The contract, we find out, is actually null and void since Beetlejuice snuck Lydia illegally into the afterlife. This is under code 699, which the intercom was blaring when they entered. It's really hard to hear it, but the intercom was definitely screaming violation code 699. Beetlejuice is sent back to the afterlife, and unfortunately Delia is taken too, but truly, in this world, death is really simple. They know how to see them again. Nothing really is bad about it. We get a dream sequence then of Lydia promising to pursue a life with the living rather than with the dead, and this, I believe, is where the main title song for Carrie plays, and just like, again, how iconic is that? Astrid goes to Dracula's castle, meets a boy, and they have a baby, but it's the crazy baby Beetlejuice. Luckily, it's all a dream. Or was it? And then that's it for my breakdown of Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. I already need and want to see this movie again. I just really loved it. I think it's really fun. It's very campy. And sometimes you need movies like this that are just so over the top silly to get out of your head, to feel great, and also get you ready for Halloween season, baby. Let me know in the comments how much you like Beetlejuice Beetlejuice, what your favorite part was, or what your favorite Easter egg is. Follow me at Lulu_Clemons and subscribe to all 3 channels in the new Rockstars network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Bye. Go listen to MacArthur Park.